I'm Matt McClure, and this is Currents. A tragic end to an all-too-short life. A Brooklyn boy's body found dismembered in a man's refrigerator. Are our streets safe?
It was just happenstance and a terrible fate for this young boy.
Plus, if America defaults on its debt, seniors could pay the price, literally.
I live on my Social Security and some of my pension, and it will make it more difficult for me.
And we'll take you to a gathering where the guest of honor is a glove.
Just the presence of the glove being here is a miracle in of itself. To have the opportunity to pray and touch the glove and be with people whose faith is so strong.
Well, good evening and thanks for joining us tonight. If you're a parent, there are many decisions you'll make on behalf of your child. Those decisions range from the basics, like what you're going to name your little bundle of joy, to tougher questions like where you're going to send your child to school. And all of these decisions come with their consequences, some anticipated and some unforeseen. Well, the decision of two Borough Park parents to allow their only son, Libby Kletsky, to walk home alone from day camp on Monday came to a tragic, very unforeseen end today that has enveloped this city in sadness and in horror. Kletsky, who would have celebrated his 9th birthday this month, was walking home alone for the very first time. He reportedly got lost and asked a stranger for help. Well, earlier today, that stranger, 35-year-old Levi Aaron, who has reportedly now confessed to the crime, led police to the terrifying discovery of the young boy's dismembered remains. Some in his refrigerator, others miles away in a dumpster in Sunset Park, Brooklyn. Well, could this tragedy have been avoided? Is New York safe for children? Well, joining me by phone to talk about all of that, maybe answer some of those questions and more, is Nancy McBride. She's with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Nancy, thanks so much for taking some time out for us. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, Matt. And I just want to say that my heart goes out to this family. This is a horrendous, terrible case.
Absolutely. And as do all of our hearts go out to this family. It's just a very tragic, of course, heartbreaking time for them as well. And you know, I mean, kids kind of walk home from, whether it be from school or from camp in this case, all the time. I mean, New York is a very busy place and there are, people walking by, and you tend to think that kids, people might watch out for your kids. There are so many people around and that kind of thing. But so that leads me into kind of my first question here is, does this kind of fly in the face of sort of how we see things work out statistically? I mean, is this something that happens a lot? Maybe we don't hear as much about it as we have in this case.
Well, the National Center did a study on attempted abductions, and I always call this the good news study. And we found out in over 5,500 cases that the most critical time for a child as far as an attempt is when they're going to and from school or school-related activities. So the rest of the good news is that 85% of the kids got away because they did something proactive. They kicked and screamed and yelled and attracted a lot of attention and did everything they could to get away from their abductor. But this is something that would have to be taught to a child, and this is something that the parents would have to be comfortable talking to their kids about. And I guess this is an opportunity to really speak about how important it is to have these conversations with our children.
Well, and one thing that really made it hit home for me, my niece is almost exactly the same age as this child. And so that really made the story hit home for me. And in thinking of this, she doesn't live in New York, and she doesn't really live somewhere where she can walk to school or walk to a camp or anything like that. She actually lives down in Georgia. But my thinking is, is 8 or 9, is that too young to be letting a child walk by themselves alone in busy streets?
Well, the National Center recommends that kids stay in groups, but this case is a perfect storm. You would think in a pedestrian urban environment like Brooklyn that a child could be able to walk home from camp, but I think it was just the convergence of everything happening, him maybe getting disoriented, which is very unfortunate, and also running into this person. And I think in situations like this, we want to make sure our kids know they can seek out people for help, but we also need to identify for them who those people are. And they're people, we encourage kids to go into a retail environment where there are a lot of other people and seek out maybe a store clerk or a mother with children or a uniformed law enforcement officer and ask that person for help. I think, unfortunately, in this case, since the child became disoriented, the child was seeking out whomever for assistance, and that's the saddest part of all.
And of course, when we deal with cases like this, it brings to mind parents really educating their children as to what to do if they find themselves in a situation when they are lost, like as you just talked about, sort of going to finding a responsible adult, a store clerk or something like that they can stay with and talk to. What other things do you recommend parents talking to their kids about and preparing them kids should they find themselves in an unfortunate situation like this?
Well, the only thing that I tell parents and guardians they need to really teach their kids to do is to get away. And these are situations that can be confusing because we raise children to be polite, to be responsive to adults. And this is a situation where we don't want the child to do any of those things. You don't have to be polite, and all you really need to do is get away as quickly as you can. So this is why it's so important that parents and guardians really practice these safety tips with their kids, set up these what-if scenarios. Tell me what you would do if you got lost. And really listen to what your child says. Just telling them certain safety rules isn't enough. You've got to make sure that the child is incorporating that information into something they can use practically in their day-to-day life.
Sure, and make sure they know that essential information as well, the parents' phone numbers, the address, and all of that. And of course, 911, a very important number to know as well.
Right.
Is there anywhere that folks can go, Nancy, to learn more about your organization and the things that folks can do to keep their kids safe?
Absolutely. They can visit our website, which is missingkids.com. We actually have a whole series of publications called Know the Rules, and two of the titles are on the homepage right now. Know the Rules, Summer Safety Tips for Parents and Guardians to Teach Their Kids, and also tips for going to amusement parks. So parents can search there, find the tips, and take this opportunity to sit down with their kids. Their kids are already frightened, so you don't want to use fear at all. You want to make sure that you reassure your kids and you talk to them about safety in a very candid, forthright manner. And if they ask you questions, answer them.
All right. Well, Nancy McBride with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, we thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate it. Thanks. Well, stay with us. New York's pro-life pregnancy centers get a reprieve. We'll have that story plus the rest of the day's headlines next. Welcome back to Currents. I'm Matt McClure. Coming up later, if Congress can't work out a deal on the debt ceiling, will seniors pay the price? First, though, let's have a look at today's headlines. Well, police in Florida have arrested a man they believe murdered a priest in Mississippi. Reporter Dennis Turner has the story.
For 9 years, Father Ed Everett led St. Peter Catholic Church in the heart of downtown Memphis. Even today, he's remembered as a friendly, jovial man who never met a stranger.
He was very creative. He was very good storyteller, and you could hear that in his sermons and the way he told stories about people.
He met a violent end Monday with a gunshot wound to the head at this Catholic retreat in Waveland, Mississippi. Police found his wallet and SUV missing. Detectives tracked his vehicle through its OnStar system and early Tuesday arrested 31-year-old Jeremy Maneri at a hotel in Polk County, Florida, just outside Orlando, and charged him with Everett's murder.
Mr. Maneri was one of the last people that we know of to see Father Everett. He was a kind of a maintenance man around the camp.
Maneri has a long record, including sex offenses and grand larceny. The loss of Father Everett's life took away a man loved by many. A big part of Father Everett's Memphis legacy is starting a capital campaign to build this addition to St. Peter's Church, which includes a new parish hall and classrooms. The building also houses a shrine to St. Martin de Porres, a Peruvian saint of mixed race known for his wisdom and problem-solving skills. Father Everett's move to Hammond, Louisiana from Memphis in 2006 didn't diminish his memory here. Father Condon says his loss is felt in Memphis as much as anywhere.
You see somebody who has done such great work, and now just all of a sudden he's no longer there.
That report from Dennis Turner. Baton Rouge Bishop Robert Munch said that Father Everett's death leaves a deeply felt void in all our lives. Well, closer to home, a federal court has issued an order preventing a New York City law on pro-life pregnancy centers from taking effect. The law, known as Bill 371, requires centers to tell people that they do not offer abortion referrals or artificial contraception. It was scheduled to take effect tomorrow. We'll have much more on this story on tomorrow night's show. Well, as New York prepares for the legalization of same-sex marriage to go into effect, Governor Andrew Cuomo says state officials do not get to decide which laws they will enforce. Cuomo spoke yesterday following news that a city clerk from upstate New York had decided to resign rather than sign same-sex marriage licenses for those same-sex couples. Well, meanwhile, the Diocese of Brooklyn has responded to an article claiming that a majority of Catholics in Brooklyn disagree with Bishop Nicholas DiMarzio on same-sex marriage. In a letter to the editor of the Brooklyn paper, diocesan spokesperson Stephanie Gutierrez points out that the paper quotes only a few people in claiming the majority of Catholic churchgoers in Brooklyn disagree with Bishop DiMarzio's edict to ban politicians who voted for same-sex marriage. Now, the letter points out that Bishop Nicholas DiMarzio did not ban politicians from going to church, but rather asked churches to not honor any state legislator regardless of how they voted on the same-sex marriage bill. Well, the controversy over same-sex marriage has entered into next year's presidential race after both Mitt Romney and Tim Pawlenty refused to sign a controversial marriage pledge. The pledge from a group known as the Family Leader stated that black children born into slavery are better off than black children born today. Well, that part of the pledge was eventually removed, but not before candidates Michelle Bachmann and Rick Santorum signed on. Romney said he strongly supports traditional marriage, but was concerned that the pledge, quote, contained references and provisions that were undignified for a presidential campaign. Pawlenty said he fully supports traditional marriage unequivocally. Well, meantime, Catholic charities in 3 Illinois dioceses have been granted a preliminary injunction allowing them to continue adoption and foster care services without granting those services to same-sex couples. The injunction came a week after the Illinois Department of Children sent letters to Catholic charities not to renew its adoption and foster care contracts with the organizations. A lawyer called the injunction a great win for the 2,000 children under the care of Catholic charities. Well, there is an abortion battle brewing in Washington, D.C., where a pro-life group is urging renewal of a ban on federal funding for abortions in the nation's capital. The Dornan Amendment prohibits taxpayer funding from going toward abortion. A group called the National Committee for a Human Life Amendment, is urging people to contact representatives and tell them to uphold that ban. Well, meanwhile, NBC has sent an apology letter to more than 100 congressmen for omitting the words "under God" from the Pledge of Allegiance during a U.S. Open golf broadcast. In a letter addressed to the co-chairs of the Congressional Prayer Caucus, NBC Universal's president says, quote, a serious error in judgment was made by a small group of people. Well, turning now to China, where the Vatican has clarified the status of an excommunicated bishop. We get details on that story from Rome Reports.
The Vatican has said the recently excommunicated Chinese priest, Father Lei Xin, will not be considered a Catholic bishop, even if he were to ask for pardon from the Pope. The Catholic Church has also asked the faithful, priests, and bishops of China to resist every form of illegitimate ordination. The Vatican's Congregation for the Evangelization of Peoples released a document clarifying the Church's position on the excommunication and the illicit ordinations that have occurred in China. They note that excommunication means Shihan has no right to govern over the diocese and can no longer celebrate Catholic rites. However, he remains a member of the Church through his baptism and should approach the Holy See at any point for reconciliation. The Holy See also clarified the status of bishops who participated in the illicit ordination. The 7 legitimate bishops who were present are deemed excommunicated unless they can prove they were forced to participate against their will. The new spokesperson for the Church of China has responded saying the ordination is a demonstration of religious liberty in China. He said by choosing their own bishops, they are following decades of tradition and independence.
Well, in Northern Ireland, the number of injured police officers has risen in fighting between Catholics and Protestants. More than 40 officers have been injured over the last 2 nights in clashing that the Associated Press has attributed to, quote, masked Catholic rioters. A police official there said Catholic and Protestant leaders made huge efforts to avoid rioting during annual marches by the Orange Order. That's a brotherhood of Protestants, which took place on Tuesday. And Israel is now allowing daily visits to the site where Jesus was baptized. The site had previously only been open to visitors several times throughout the year. The change required the removal of mines in the West Bank along the border with Jordan. Well, stay with us. There is more Currents coming up. Coming up, this glove might not be as famous as Michael Jackson's, but for Catholics, it's much more significant.
This glove represents the suffering that he endured. And as painful as that was to him, it is a relief to us, because this glove gives us the hope of a saint.
Welcome back. Well, if you open up a newspaper today or you turn on the TV, and it will be no surprise to learn that many of us out there are looking for a miracle. You know, with all the worry about the nation's debt, the country's battle fatigue over ongoing wars around the globe, and the dismal domestic jobs numbers, many of us are looking towards the heavens for answers. Well, at St. Finbar Roman Catholic Church in Bath Beach, Brooklyn, many gather at the parish's monthly Mass in honor of St. Padre Pio to pray for their more personal needs, those tests that need to be passed, the bills that need to be paid, or those illnesses that need to be overcome. Well, the beloved Italian saint is probably most known for his stigmata, or the wounds that match those of Jesus on the cross. He was known to wear gloves to cover the bleeding wounds on his palms, the palms of his hands. And one of his gloves was on display last night as an anxious public gathered in the hopes of receiving a helping hand from beyond.
Pio did not give up. This man was in pain all day, all night. What did I say last month? Up until 3 days before the day he died, he had the stigmata. Tonight, we celebrate a special Mass in honor of St. Pio. So many people, they come, they have a devotion to Padre Pio, it's very big. And they come because they're just full of sorrow, the weight of suffering, illness. And they just come, and it's an opportunity for them to pray, but to just share some of that with fellow parishioners and Christians, but also to share it with Padre Pio. This glove represents the suffering that he endured. And as painful as that was to him, it is a relief to us, because this glove gives us the hope of a saint. At the Mass, we have present one of the gloves that Padre Pio wore. Padre Pio had the stigmata, which are the 5 wounds of Christ. 1 wound on the side, 2 in the palm of the hand, and 2 on the feet. And so for Padre Pio, he would put a glove over the bandages that was on his hand. And he would have to change these, of course, frequently. And so there are many gloves that are all over the world that are now, because his blood is on it, first-class relics.
I met Lou at St. Anselm's. His mother brought this glove from Italy, and she wanted many people as can, to venerate it.
He allows the glove to go around, but most importantly, gives it to St. Finbar once a month so that we could hold this Mass, so that people can actually come to touch a relic of Padre Pio. We do not pray to the saint per se. We ask the saint to intercede for us to God. They are just the portal to God. St. Pio is a powerful saint, no doubt about it. You know, all saints are. But in this particular area of Brooklyn, there are a lot of older parishioners who actually came from the area that Padre Pio was living. And so there is a personal connection to someone who died recently. You know, we're not talking about a 15th century saint. We're talking about someone who lived in our time. So it not only gives us hope that there is the communion of saints, but that people that we know have actually achieved this. It gives us encouragement that we too must participate in this call to holiness.
I believe that I will be helped by Padre Pio. He's an amazing saint who's performed so many miracles.
I have cancer. Padre Pio would heal me.
just the presence of the glove being here is a miracle in of itself, to have the opportunity to pray and touch the glove and be with people whose faith is so strong, and to be together, I feel like our faith grows stronger.
The goal for these masses has always been to provide a place for people who are truly hurting to come. And it's just a little morale booster for them, so that they walk out of here knowing that whatever's going on, whatever trouble is on their shoulders, they're not going to sink, because not only is God holding them up, not only is Padre Pio pulling for them, but their brothers and sisters are also willing to catch them so that they don't fall. And we walk out of this church at the end of the night with a spirit of hope and prayer.
Stay with us, there's much more Currents coming up. When we return, Social Security checks are due out August 3rd, but what if America defaults on its debt before then? Seniors sound off.
If people are not getting Social Security, many of them only get Social Security, they will be out on the street.
And finally tonight, doesn't it feel like there is no escaping the chest-thumping and political posturing on Capitol Hill as the back and forth on America's debt carries on? But according to the latest National Pew Research Washington Post poll, despite all the warnings of biblical proportion economic apocalypse if the government fails to raise the nation's debt ceiling, many Americans say they do not have a good understanding of what exactly would happen if the debt limit is not raised. Only a narrow majority, 55%, say they know very well what not raising the limit could do. But perhaps that factoid is not so shocking. I mean, just yesterday in a Fox News interview, House Speaker John Boehner made the surprising admission that he did not know what would happen if the debt ceiling is not reached. Well, Speaker Boehner is looking for a lesson on just what economic catastrophe would mean for the everyday man and woman if he needs that. Well, he would need to look no further than the seniors at the St. Charles Jubilee Senior Center in downtown Brooklyn. The speaker would no doubt benefit from their words of wisdom. After months of negotiation and with a deadline looming, the debt crisis talks seem no closer to a clear resolution. But yesterday, the president made a shocking declaration.
I cannot guarantee that those checks go out on August 3rd if we haven't resolved this issue, because there may simply not be the money in the coffers to do it.
House Speaker John Boehner says the ball has fallen squarely in the president's court.
This debt limit increase is his problem, and I think it's time for him to lead by putting his plan on the table.
But the president complains that the Republicans' plans smack of short-term solutions.
I will not sign a 30-day or a 60-day or a 90-day extension. That is just not an acceptable approach.
As long as this president is in the Oval Office, a real solution is probably unattainable.
And while Washington is clenched in political gridlock, seniors in Brooklyn are concerned they're the ones getting hurt.
Should, God forbid, there not be a Social Security payment this month in August, that means I and many other people would find it impossible to cover their rent.
I'm not going to die next month, but what I do worry about is if they're not paying Social Security, they're not also not paying our Medicare.
Well, I live on my Social Security and some of my pension, and it will make it more difficult for me.
I'll tell everybody I'll pay them when I get the money.
Sheila Garson, program director at Catholic Charities St. Charles Jubilee Senior Center in Brooklyn, says threats to seniors' benefits aren't anything new.
Cutting Social Security has been on the table for a very, very long time. And so whether you couch it as a debt ceiling issue or some other type of issue, I think seniors are always fearing that their Social Security is going to get cut. Seniors do get picked on by both the city, the state, and the federal government when it comes time to make budget cuts.
Yeah, well, there's nobody left to pick on. You know.
The poor do not have representation like the wealthy can get.
Seniors, it seems to be, are not a priority with this government. They were, but now it seems it's changed. We may have a one-term president on our hands.
What little money they give us, we have to beg every 2 years to have reinstated. They're always threatening to cut our funding.
Meanwhile, back on Capitol Hill, House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi said she hopes Congress will arrive at a better option.
I've heard some on the other side say we should pay the Chinese government before we send out a Social Security check. Well, we do have to honor our debts. but we have to fight very hard to make sure we don't have to make those kinds of choices.
But whatever unfolds as the debt crisis races toward the August 2nd deadline, many seniors won't rest easy.
They feel it's unfair. They feel that they are, they are the working class who have very little money to begin with, so it's sort of like trying to get blood from a stone. And they've worked very hard. I mean, this is, the greatest generation, and yet here they are literally, having to beg every single year to have what little money that they're getting, remain. So it's, it's very disheartening and it's very insulting to them.
Well, and unfortunately, it doesn't look like it's anything that's going to be solved, at least not in the long term, for quite some time. And it looks like they're probably still going to be threatening cuts to Social Security and all that for quite a while. That's been something that the previous president called kind of the third rail of American politics, and nobody wanted to touch it, but the talks are happening right now, and we'll kind of just have to keep waiting and seeing where it all goes. Well, that is it for this edition of Currents, but be sure and join us tomorrow as we take you to the final installment of Grillin' with God. I'm hungry already just thinking about it. Until then, be sure to visit us online over at currentsny.net. You can go there to watch selected reports from the show and also full broadcasts. You can also friend us on Facebook or follow us on Twitter. Our Twitter handle is @CurrentsNY. For all of us here at Currents, I'm Matt McClure. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great night.